Welcome to Substrate Seminar, everyone. I'm stoked to have Alejandro and Santiago here today, two of my colleagues at Parity. I'll let them do their introductions, but at a high level, Alejandro is a support engineer and at Parity, and Santiago is a Substrate Builder Success lead, which means that he helps projects in the Substrate Builders program kind of take off, let's say, and Al is the one who's behind with the hammer and the wrench, making sure things aren't broken. So for those of you who are new today, I just like to kick things off with our Substrate Seminar repository. It is a way for you to either propose topics that you'd like to hear more about on Substrate Seminar, or also just actually pitch a talk that you'd like to give here. So just like real quick, we've got a bunch of open topics, and these are also open for you guys to comment on, to ask questions. For example, we have a really exciting one going on here with Subsquid, possibly going to be very soon scheduled in the near future. So again, just as a reminder, like this is the way to like open Substrate Seminar for the community, for you guys to contribute and participate. And today we are going to talk about Rococo. We have a kind of outline here in this repository, so please feel free to just check this out, do some reading while the seminar is going, maybe ask questions. Really, the goal here is that you can come to seminar informed and prepare questions that you might have. Today's especially special, not only because we have Alejandro, who's been actively working on onboarding parachains onto Rococo, and Santiago, who has also been doing the same thing in his lens of the builders world. And we will be discussing the current onboarding process and what the future of Rococo looks like. So I think one of the topics today is discussing about how can we improve on the onboarding process, and how can we really make Rococo a community owned network, right? A testing network for parachains that is really community driven. So with that being said, I would like to kind of give the stage to either you or Ale, or Santi or Ale. I don't know which one of you wants to start. Maybe introduce yourselves. Just say hi. You're all muted up, so it would be great to hear you.
Go ahead, Ale. You first.
Alrighty. So, well, Sasha introduced me already. My name is Alejandro. I have been working in Parity as a support engineer for 1 year and a bunch of months now. It has been great. I have learned a lot. It's such an amazing ecosystem to explore, and lately I've been working very closely with teams developing parachains to help them sort out technical issues like runtime development or just onboarding processes and such, right? And it's crazy. It's absolutely amazing. I've loved it so far. Well, that could be a little bit over.
So what are the biggest problems that you find yourself fixing, Ale?
Oh my god. A little bit of everything. There is my tasks are sprinkled with very different type of issues, and that comes for something like, hey, I don't know how to set up an HRMP channel, or I don't know if this XCM call is composed properly or not, to just something more developer thinking okay, we want to do something with this storage item, and we don't know if this is the best way to do it or not, how we should proceed, or what are the pros and cons of setting this schema on our palette, something like that, right? So there is a lot of different things. I'm more involved in the Rococo stuff and helping teams to do the integrations to testing and all this stuff.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so my image of you with a toolbox and a wrench and a hammer behind Teams is not too far off, right?
Not at all. I can
And
definitely,
Santi, yeah, what do you have to say about that, and also
yeah.
your role in?
I can definitely attest to that, right? I do work with a lot of different teams, and Ale is sort of like my savior in a lot of different moments, right? When it just gets to a point where I have no idea how to solve anything. I just go at Alejandro, and he just appears magically and just solves it, right? So yeah, it's amazing. Working with Ale is very very good, and he's learned a lot in last year, and something that has been a priority. So it's very cool. Yeah, I can 100% attest
Yeah.
to that for sure.
Yeah, so Santi, tell us a little bit about yourself, the work that you do at Parity, just real quick for introduction's sake.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, Santiago, as you said, Santi makes me feel a little bit younger. So anybody can call me Santi. That's even better. What I do at Parity is that very long name that you said, which basically means that I'm here to just help any team that wants to build in the Substrate Polkadot Kusama ecosystem, right? For that, we've got several initiatives. The ones that I'm overlooking at right now is the Substrate Builders Program, Square One, and those that basically allows us to understand and help you deliver a product, right? So Square One is an initiative that we have where if you have no idea where to get started in the Polkadot ecosystem, we just have a quick call. We understand what you're after, what you're trying to do, and we help you get the best resources that we have for your specific use case. Whereas the Substrate Builders Program is one of the many initiatives that happen there, and it's a bit more towards people that are actually building something with Substrate that already have their POC up and running and want to turn that POC into a live parachain, right? Or maybe it could be a POC into a live, I don't know, a chain explorer or whatever that could be, some infrastructure thing going on. So those are the things that I overlook at Parity and that I'm mainly focused at the moment.
And specifically with Rococo. So let's
Yeah.
let's kind of slowly move towards Rococo. I mean, I know that you've been very involved with at least being part of the conversations of how Rococo has been evolving over time. And I know you're going to talk about this in your slides, but maybe real quick, so just like your involvement with the evolution of Rococo, how has that?
Yeah. So I've been at Parity as well, like almost 2 years now, right? And I've seen Rococo from where Rococo didn't exist all the way to now. And Rococo started back then as a testnet for developers at Parity, looking to just get parachain code up and running. And I'm going to touch about this in a little bit. I'm not going to spoil my little joke that I have there on my slides. But all in all, I saw, we actually had a call, I remember back then, this is like a year and a half ago with Rob and Basti trying to convince people to join Rococo to test it out, right? To see, hey, is this parachain stuff working as we expect to? What do we need to change before even it being live on Kusama and Polkadot? But now that Kusama parachains have been there for a year or a bit more, and Polkadot parachains have been there like for 6 months or something like that, we saw the need in the ecosystem to have like a testnet for all parachains, right? Whether those that are live as parachains on Kusama/Polkadot or those that want to connect in the future. Polkadot, in essence, it's quite vast in what builders can do and what builders can build, and having like a testnet for everybody out there is definitely something that that we see has a lot of value, right? And will eventually help creators or builders test their crazy ideas. There was back in the day an experiment with testnet being run by the community called Cha Cha Cha. But we believe that right now we're not in a place where the community can 100% run this, but we expect that in the future we can transition to a more community-owned testnet, and we'll see when we get there.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a great segue into your slides. So I'm just going to be here in the back answering questions. Really, as of now, it's like Santiago and Alejandro will be leading. And those watching, those of you watching live, take the opportunity to ask your questions also, right? I'll be looking at the ask a question box. Any questions that could come up, please don't be shy. It's part of being here at Seminar together. So I would really appreciate some engagement if there is. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that you can share yours, Santi.
Yeah.
And let's do that.
100%. And yeah, adding to your comment there, Sasha, my slides are very simple, right? and they're aimed to just get the conversation started. So please, any questions or anything you guys have?
So I'll even add to that is like I really want this seminar to be educational for people currently connecting to Rococo and using Rococo, but also to be number two, like this kind of let's kickstart this conversation about making Rococo more community involved, really where at the end of the day, it would be great to have a test network that can be completely owned by the community. Hopefully this seminar could be useful for those watching in the future, at least as a point as a source of information for knowing where things are at today and where things will hopefully change to. So cool. With that being said, I'm gonna just mute myself, and the floor is yours, Santi.
Quick question though, Sasha, can you see my screen there? It's the
All right. I can see your slide.
Then let's kick it over. So yeah, thank you very much, by the way, for kicking the conversation here about Rococo. It's been a network that's been growing a lot. It's good to just like have a broader conversation with the community. In the end, what we want is for you guys as the community to just use it more and more and to test these things out. So let's just get it right. Rococo, in essence, is this, we call it the parachain testnet of Sama, but it's even more and more than that, right? As said, I've got some guiding slides here, but really what we want to do is just kickstart this conversation. But in general, what I'll be touching into right now is what is Rococo and why do we need something like Rococo? How does Rococo look like under the hood? What are short-term leases and long-term leases? You're going to understand that in a minute. What's the onboarding process? I'll just touch a little bit into it, and then Alex is going to show us a bit more how it actually works. And then we can talk about Rococo's future. And this last slide has just two very simple bullet points with the idea of stop presenting this and just discussing with all of you and see what you guys want, right? There's also a survey that we've been running this last week to understand what people are saying about Rococo, so we can use that as a base of discussion as well. So what is Rococo, right? Rococo is sort of like the testnet relay chain of the entire .sama ecosystem, right? It works as a testnet not only for parachains, but for every single product that developers want to build out there, right? When we look into this, we're thinking about building parachains, building pallets, building smart contracts on top of these parachains, building infrastructure, building whatever. So it becomes very, very important because of the architecture that Polkadot has. And it originally, like, again, going back into what I was saying before, it originally started all as the network where all the parachain code was actually being developed, right? So Basti, Rob, that were like deep into like building the parachain consensus mechanism and everything that we know that now works, actually used Rococo back then as their own testnet, right? But now this testnet has evolved into a solid testnet that allows every single team to connect to it, right? And sort of like the vision that we have with this is that teams would connect their parachains, let's say, or deploy their smart contracts on something like Rococo to test it out, to sort of like understand how the technology works and try to play around with it. Then just do the same with Kusama with now real value and make sure that the considerations when the value is at stake still maintained, and then just launch a more secure and battle-tested product in Polkadot, right? But why is it that Rococo is so important, specifically for this ecosystem that we're in? And before that, I've got this joke, right? Sorry, I forgot about this slide, but this is what I want to talk. The actually first 3 parachains that Rococo had in its life, a year and a half ago, more or less, were named Tick, Trick, and Track. And I don't know if anybody speaks German here or has been like watching Disney movies in German, but Tick, Trick, and Track is actually the names of Donald Duck's nephews in German. So those were the first 3 parachains that Rococo had back in the day when we were playing around with this. Just a side comment. But why is it that Rococo is important, right? And the way that I structured this in my mind.
Santi, if you don't mind me interrupting you, there's a question that I think you can answer relevant to the last slide. Is how does Rococo compare to West End?
That's a very good question. So West End is a place where there's not much innovation, I'd say, but rather it's a place where Parity developers are shipping code before deploying that on Kusama and Polkadot, right? But there's not much different to it. Rococo, we're going to see in a couple of slides, that has the code that we can expect on a network like Kusama, but on top of it, it has like new brand features that developers can start playing with, right? So Rococo is a bit more on the, let's say, innovative side of things, where things are still getting tested that could go into production or not, but it will still give the developers the ability to just play around with them and try them out. One example there is what we call Beefy, which is allowing a team like Snowfork that deployed yesterday their parachain on Polkadot on Rococo, to start testing out their trustless bridge with Ethereum, right? So that is live as of yesterday on Rococo, and it's not on Western or anywhere else.
And just because in the chat I see that there's someone asking, Rococo to West End is Kusama to Dot?
One could say that, yes. I think it's a valid assumption. Yeah, but the one thing that I would be very strict about is that one should not expect to go from Rococo to Western as they go from Kusama to Polkadot. Rococo is where all this parachain testing is going to live. No parachain testing will happen on Westerns. Right.
Yeah, and similarly on Kusama, we're not really testing in that same way, right? We're actually the chains are connected to Kusama, like they've actually won a slot and they're in business, versus a chain that's connected to a test net can just kind of connect as they want, connect, come and go, maybe completely nuke the runtime or whatever, make drastic changes. They don't need to have persistent state, basically.
Exactly.
Not economically critical. Cool. I hope that answers that question, Marco.
Cool. Thank you for that. So yeah, I was gonna dive into why does something like Rococo is important, right? And the way that I structured this in my mind is actually in two very specific lines or verticals, if you wish. One has to do with the endless possibilities that the Polkadot architecture allows developers to build with, and the other one has to do with all the new technologies that Polkadot is bringing to the blockchain ecosystem as a whole, and how we need to learn about them, right? So if we look into the endless possibilities, developers on Polkadot can build parachains, they can build pallets, they can build smart contracts, they can build infrastructure tooling, they can build like almost whatever, right? So you need a place where all these things can live on a more persistent way as a testnet. And then on the other side, Polkadot as an architecture is also bringing new technologies, right, that we are not used to in the blockchain world, right? So all that has to do with XCM and XCMP, all this dealing with asynchronicity on these different chains, learning how to work natively with a multi-chain approach. All of this is not existent, right? It's something that we're still playing around with and that we're still trying to understand. And Polkadot already has it, so we need a place where all of this can be tested by developers as well. So think about a smart contract deployed on a parachain that wants to use XCM to talk with a smart contract on another parachain, or wants to talk with a pallet on another parachain, whatever that could be. Right now, there's no place for that to happen. And Rococo aims to be that place long term where all of these developers can come together and play around with all the tools that the ecosystem has to offer, right? So all in all, the way that I summarize this in my head is that Rococo needs to provide this playground, right, for users or developers, if you wish, to interact with all the technological fabric that exists in the ecosystem, right, which is quite vast. It will ideally, right, serve as a catalyst for innovative ideas that can only live in a truly native multi-chain world, right? So we should expect, thanks to Rococo, a new wave of applications that will use this multi-chain world and applications approach more natively. But how does Rococo look under the hood? And one of those guys could definitely be Ada right here. We're just working a lot with how Rococo actually looks, right? So touching a little bit on Western and Rococo before, right? Rococo is a bit of a mixture between what you can expect on Kusama's runtime and very new important features, right? As said, one of these very new important features is Beefy, for example. Beefy allows teams to be able to understand finality in Ethereum. So the Beefy implementation is right now being used by a parachain called Snowbridge, right, from the Snowfork team. They deployed yesterday on Rococo, and what they're doing basically is they are bridging in a very trustless way with, I think it's Ropsten, if I'm not mistaken. Either Ropsten or Ringby, one of those. But basically what they have is a bridge that has smart contracts on one end, a parachain on the other one, and thanks to Beefy, they can understand finality on both ends. And that is how they achieve like this completely trustless bridge between these two networks, which is going to be very important. It will always Rococo follow Kusama's configuration, which is a bit more aggressive than Polkadot. In fact, in some ways, Rococo is a bit more aggressive in its configuration than Kusama as well. So, for example, lease periods on Kusama are 7 days. 7 days, if I'm not mistaken, whereas on Rococo, they're only 1 day, right? So those things are a bit more aggressive. Right now, and I have it on the next slide, but we're seeing that a lot of teams are going way deep into HRP channels creations. So we might push the needle a bit more on how many HRP channels can be created by each team. And all of those things, we try to be a little bit more aggressive on Rococo, again, to just allow for this testing going on. Rococo does not have the crawlons or staking modules. We are still finding ways on how we can do this on a dummy way, but we do not want crawlons to happen on Rococo as is right now. And we tried it out in the past, and the thing that happens is that whoever is the smartest to outrun the testnet and get the most tokens basically wins. So these are the things, right, that just do not make sense on a testnet without value, right? These are the things that only make sense to test out on value-bearing networks. And this is one of the reasons why Kusama exists, right? So Rococo will not have crawlon or staking as we know it, but it might have it on a different way, sort of like a dummy way, if there are teams that want to try out products that have to do with these two things, right? So, for example, there are conversations with Akala that they have these liquid staking protocols, and they would like to run some tests on Rococo. So we might have some sort of like dummy staking so that they can play out with their products. Rococo as well has full support of HRMP channels and everything that has to do with XCM and XCMP. And it has a very special palette that it's called assigned slots. I have a link on a couple of slides that it's being used to onboard and offboard parachains to its network. So right now, if we look into Rococo, there are 30 parachains already connected, 22 of which are production parachains. This means that there are 22 of the combination between Kusama and Polkadot parachains that are already live on Rococo. And there are also on top of that 9 parathreads ready to be onboarded. There's 44 HRP channels open. This is 22 two-way channels, or 44 in total. And there are 3 common good parachains. One is Rockmine, which is the equivalent to StateMine statement. Then we've got Encointers, a parachain that lives on Kusama. And this is the last one, which is the contracts one. It's not a common good chain. It does not exist as a common good chain, but it's a chain that has been deployed as if it were a common good chain on Rococo, which holds the contracts palette so that anybody that wants to develop with Ink can just deploy it on the parachain on Rococo. Now, let me just bring some water here. Rococo has this sort of knowledge of long-lasting and short-lasting slots, right? And the idea here is, how do we scale and how do we give everybody a fair chance of connecting to Rococo whilst we keep the network safe, right? We do not want to break this network at all. We're still testing like the boundaries of the network, so we just don't want to break it. And the way that we find out that really works with this is just separating between long-lasting slots and short-lasting slots. If a team has a parachain on either Kusama or Polkadot, they will always have a slot on Rococo. This is what we call long-lasting slots. So if a team is live on either relay chain, they will have a live network on Rococo as well. However, if a team does not have a slot on Kusama and or Polkadot, they will be assigned a temporary slot on Rococo. Right now, temporary slots are 3 days long. There can be 5 teams at any given time with a temporary slot on the raw parachains list. And from all the teams that want a temporary slot, what the assigned palettes is doing, and I just linked it to the GitHub on the top right, it's just going in a round-robin fashion, and every 3 days, offboards these 5 and onboards new 5. All the time it's doing that, right? We believe that this is the best compromise that we have right now onto making sure that, again, the system is secure and that developers can test on this testnet. But again, we're just trying it out, right? And one of the things that we've learned from the survey that we ran last week was that with 3-day slots, slot days, right? If a team gets onboarded on a Friday, on Monday they're off, and they just didn't have enough time to test during the weekend because nobody's working during the weekend. So those things are the ones that we need to fine tune, and the ones that we need the community as well to tell us, like, hey, just let's do this a little bit different, right? So this is a bit of the knowledge that we have here with long-lasting and short-lasting slots.
Yeah, that stuff is super interesting. And I think I will like actually go into the like what that actually looks like in code and stuff. I have a question, and my question is, okay, so we know that Kusama, for example, is a testing network with real economics value for chains, and their validator sets are also like decentralized, and anyone can join the network and become a validator. Here with Rococo, who is actually paying the network cost for maintaining these validators? Like, we have actual servers running. Like, who is paying that cost, and at what cost is my question.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And right now, Parity is the one that's affording that, right? So we at Parity are the ones that are actually paying for maintaining this network up and running, which is not cheap, right? The more parachains that we add, the more nodes that we need to run. But we again believe that for the sake of keeping the network running in the long run, until we have something that we're comfortable with, we're gonna keep this run by Parity altogether. Again,
it could look like in the future we could have Parity maybe runs some nodes, and maybe some other project runs some other nodes, some other project runs some other nodes.
Yeah, that could happen. In fact,
maybe those that have the long-lasting slots, for example, and can.
That could happen, right? And in fact, one of the things that we did in Rococo in the past, when we didn't go, 100% into making everybody aware that this was like the testing for parachains, was that everybody that wanted to join the network needed to run at least 2 validator nodes. That was the way that we were doing it back then. That worked, but then people would just like come in and out. There was not this notion of long-lasting slots or whatever, and I would just like turn off their nodes, so it was not reliable how many nodes you actually had live or not. So those things are the ones that we thought at this very beginning, while we get this running and it produces value for the ecosystem, that we need to just cost ourselves, right? Once the ecosystem sees the value that this has and really like gets into testing it all, we'll definitely just gonna start onboarding other nodes for sure.
Yeah. The challenge is that there's no economics kind of securing and incentivizing. So that is a big challenge. Cool. Thank you for answering that.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? And that's, sorry, Sasha, to interrupt there, but that's what happens as well with crowd loans and staking both, right? So if I open a crowd loan module and ask teams, hey, whoever wins the crowd loan wins, right? Given that there's no economic value here, in the end, it's the one that can get the most tokens of the faucet wins, right? And that's not something that we want to incentivize either, because then the faucet runs out of tokens and there's not much we can do, and yeah, it's not good. And so again, this network is here to stay long term, and we're gonna make sure that we take the necessary steps so that everybody can rely on Rococo to test their products.
So we actually have a bunch of questions that came in.
Nice.
So the Rucker is asking, have there been any cases where parachain teams crashed the relay chain or have found bugs in Rococo? So
no, it has not happened that the parachains have crashed the Rococo relay chain, neither any other relay chain. As far as I understand, the way that parachain code is created, it makes it so that no parachain out there can actually crash the relay chain for whatever reason.
Yeah, right. That makes sense. So the other question that we have here by Camille is, do you use Rococo for stress testing of Substrate? For example, do you test cases where there are extreme amount of forks in the network, or a case where with malicious nodes? If not, do you have maybe other test networks that test such cases?
We do. In fact, we are not using Rococo for that. Again, we do not want to break Rococo at all. Rococo is a service for the ecosystem where they can run their parachains, right? So we're not going to be stress testing Rococo in that sense. but we're going to be enabling them to have all the features that they need to just have full-fledged products as they want. For that sort of stress testing, there are other testnets out there, and there's a tool called the ZombieNet. You can find it on Parity's GitHub that allows you to spin up a testnet with whatever resources you want to have. So if you want to have 1,000 nodes, whatever that could be, I don't know, and just like, shoot them with, I don't know how many transactions, you can do it and see what happens. You can run any test that you want there. And ZombieNet is sort of like a tool that allows you to spin up these networks and then shut them down, right? Quite easily. So yeah, we're not using Rococo for that, but we are doing those tests on other testnets.
Yeah, super great answer, Santiago. I'm just also linking the ZombieNet here in the chat. Cool. A last question is, and maybe this could be answered by Ale when we're looking at more technical stuff, but the question is, can we predict when a chain with a temp slot will be onboarded again?
Yes, I think we could look into it. I'm not so sure exactly how, but let's move on to the code and see if we can figure it out. There's
Cool,
I think there's sort of like a VEC or something like that you could look into to see like where
yeah, I think it's entirely predictable as it is now.
Yeah.
It's a round robin sort of wait in the queue for your turn type algorithm. But I'm sure Ale will shine some more light there later.
Yeah,
cool. That's all for questions.
Later. Happy to.
Nice. Cool. So yeah, I've got one more slide, and we can then take it over to the people that actually know this, which is Ale in this case. But the last thing that I wanted to briefly touch upon, and Ale again is going to cover this a lot, is how the onboarding process to Rococo looks like, and why it's a little bit different if you have a long-lasting slot or if you have a short-lasting slot, right? So if you have a long-lasting slot, that means that you've got a live network on either Kusama or Polkadot. And what we try to do there is we try to respect the para ID that you have on the network, right? So if a team has a para ID has a parachain, on Kusama and Polkadot, we'll use their Kusama para ID. If it only has Polkadot, we'll use their Polkadot para ID. But the idea of respecting this is that there's a lot of tooling behind this, and it makes it way easier for teams to test out their XCM messages if they can rely on the same para ID to then port that code onto the production networks. So if you've got a long-lasting slot, you will need to open an issue on our support repository, which is linked here. You need to tell us what is your Watson, what is your Genesis, and your Kusama para ID, and we will use sudo to force that onto the chain, right? We'll make sure that you have that same para ID. If you have a short-lasting slot, then you need to get the para ID yourself on Rococo. You need to register your parachain on Rococo, and then you create a GitHub issue telling us, hey, this is my para ID. It's already onboarded. Please put it into the queue for the long-lasting slots, and we'll go ahead and do that, right? But the slight difference comes with the fact that for long-lasting slots, we try to respect the same para ID that you have on Kusama, and we need to force that to sudo. There's no way around it, unfortunately. So yeah, and with this, this is a picture of Ale last week. The idea is to just go over and onto him so that he can walk us through the actual process in code.
All right, so let's jump in and let's see how this looks. Let me share my screen. And let's get started. Oh, did I say I shared the wrong screen? Sorry.
Cool. So I actually just created a poll for those that are interested in getting a little engaged here and participate.
Yeah. What you're seeing right now, if you're seeing something, is the GitHub story where we are collecting all the issues for onboarding. Let me share the link here. So basically, once you're ready to go in, like as Santi suggested, you just have to came here and open an issue. We have it already ready, with a template like Rococo slot request that you can open, and you just have to fill your parity, the state and the code and head that you will be using and such, and we get everything ready for you to jump in as soon as possible, right? Right now, the onboardings are doing like manually, like there's like people from Parity like that holds the sudo key from Rococo that is onboarding these networks, right? So that is one of the reasons that why we need you to let us know like you want to onboard in an issue form or whatever. And the other like reason it will be like it makes everything like much more like tidy, like to have all the information in one place there in the repo, and you can see like okay which teams are in like with which artifacts, what are the heads and the code, the runtimes that they are using. So if we need like to recover that information at some point for whatever reason, like it's everything there, and we have to like be less buggy when it comes like to us reaching you guys builders like okay like I need you to tell me again like which was the head or which was the code or whatever, right? Now it's everything is there and it's easy. That said, this like pseudo barrier, I think it will be something that eventually I would like to see like being removed or like diluted to as possible, so you guys can onboard as you want, like without like
So pretty much right now it's like you're a concierge at a hotel and you have a lineup of parachains that are trying to get a room, and they also need to drop off their chain spec and their WASM blob in order to get the key to get into their room. And obviously it's a far from ideal scenario, but with maintaining a test network that has no economics tied to it, securing it, I think it's challenging to find an alternative. But hopefully we'll talk a little bit more about what the alternatives could be.
For the moment, I think we are being agile enough for not being a blocker.
Yeah, right.
But the sooner like that we can remove these kind of things, the less probable.
So Ali, can you just step us through just real quick, like what exactly what is the process where you are actually registering under a sudo account? So like what information do you need and what does it actually look like? Do you literally just get the information you need and then maybe message the team on Element and say, hey, okay, we got your support request. I'm going to onboard you now. Is that how it works? Like maybe can you add a little color to that?
So usually like the first engagement comes from the team, like, hey, we want to test, right? And we let them know like if they are not aware, like, okay, like this is the place where you have to open an issue to get things going on. Once the issue is in place, I usually like jump in, like take the artifacts, and I will just like operate like through like the registrar palette if they are not already registered. So this like fits into I want a long lasting slot because I have something on a production network going on. So I am like suitable for having one long lasting slot. And like as we are, let me go back for a moment. And as we are like managing this, Parities right now on Kusama or Polkadot are not like big enough to be like bigger than 3,000, and the only available and free parities that we are offering in Rococo are like from 3,000 on, so there is no overlaps from people that wants to like reserve a parity for short-term slots and teams that already have one going on. So as we are not allowing you to reserve one parity on the 2,000, 3,000 range, we will have to register that for you. And having sudo key makes that as easy as just like operating through sending a call with the registrar palette.
Right.
Okay, but I don't have the key.
Cool. And I think an important thing to note is that all of this logic is basically encapsulated in this registrar's palette, right?
Yeah.
Where where that
exactly.
it is subject to change. It also has comments, I think, in the palette, if I remember correctly, about possible changes.
And the registrar palette is the same one that is running on Kusama, and this is the very same one that is running on Polkadot. So
Right.
there is nothing like different here. Like the process is the same. It's just like instead of going through governance or through a crowdrun or through an auction, there is like a pseudo like key doing like root actions for you, right? We will register you for here, like sending this code with whatever ID you need, right? And in case of being a short-term slots, you can do this yourself. And things get a little bit more fancy when it comes like to lease assignment. As Santi mentioned, we have this palette that is called assigned slots that let us assign like the long-lasting slots and the short-term slots, right? And there is not much to see here on Polkadot.js, but I will jump to the code right now to explain all the differences.
Cool. Yeah, this is actually what I meant. The palette where this logic is basically encapsulated. Where this round robin logic is implemented, where chains either they will have a long lasting slot if they're already parachains, or they can just come in for 3 days, right?
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah. At this very moment, like when a long slot is assigned to a Parity, it grants you like leases for a duration of 1 year or something like that, available to get more after that. And as mentioned, like a short lasting slot will give you like a slot for 3 days where you will onboard, and after that, like you will onboard, leaving a place for another team to go up and do their testing. And once that is finished, it keeps on going, so on, right? So let's go directly to the code. This palette, if you want to see the source code, it was already shared, but is under the Polkadot repository, runtime common assigned slots. You see here with this, right? And I will not go like super deeply into every part of the palette, but there's like a few things that I want to point out.
Can you zoom in a little bit, Ale? It's just a tiny bit.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, cool.
Better?
Nice. Yeah, much better.
This is, I mean, for the long lasting slots, it's very straightforward because it's like, okay, like we don't have to onboard you and like offboard you like in a round robin way or nothing. So we are just giving you a lot of leases, right? So it gets trickier with the short term ones. And here, for example, we can see like this struct here that contains all the information that is like that relates to a short-term slot, a temporary slot that it's called in the code. So as per the registrar, we will have a manager, like this account ID. This is who is like managing the Parity. Nothing super innovative here, but then we have like the period with when that para should onboard as a parachain ID. That this can happen either on the current lease period or in the next one when we assign the short-term slots. We assign it either for the one that is going on right now, that maybe sometimes is not convenient because I don't know, it's about to finish or something like that, so it will be like just burning one of these like lease periods that it has, or the next one, right? And it has the period count that is like for how many lease periods that para will be up. And the last lease, this like marks the last time you were up. So this matters because when the round robin, I mean, like if you think about it a little bit, if you stop and like think about it for a minute, you say, okay, like so we have a round robin like way of assigning these short-term slots, and if we like get a lot of parities like for short-term IDs for short-term leases, there will arrive a moment where like there will be like one parity that will not be able like to get a lease because it's so long in the queue and the queue is getting longer and longer that it will like just sit there forever, right? But that's not the case. The palette like obviously like takes this into account. Like if you have been like waiting long enough, you will get like some priority and you will be like onboarded again, so you don't die of starvation sitting down there and doing nothing. So there is no problems with that. That is cool. And based on this information, that you can query this on the state on the change state here, it's something that you can query. Let's just query. I don't have. I mean, I will just like pop up some 3000 Parity here. Yeah, good try, right? Okay, right. This one exists. You can see this, right? Like we have like a manager, account ID, the period where it begin, and the last list, and its duration. So this Parity, for example, onboarded on the lease period 20, stayed during 3 lease periods, onboarded as a parachain, producing blocks and getting blocks finalized, and offboarded the 23. And this Parity has only this parachain has only been up once. So and this, like, I want to link this with the question that Daniel did before about, like, okay, how can I like know when my parachain is going to be onboarded? So you have the information about the last time you were, and you know the amount of parachains that are waiting for being onboarded. Right now, for example, there is like 10 parachains that are holding a temporary slot, and you know that there is like the onboards and offboards go in batch of 5 parachains go up, 5 parachains go down, so the next 5 can go up, and so on. So you can do the math this way. Maybe this is,
but you would also need to account for the amount of time they've been waiting already, right?
Yeah, but I mean, at least you can have an estimate if
yeah
like, because that, like, it's I mean maybe it's like getting too precise, and it's not worth it, because you say, okay, if it's not today that I was estimated, maybe it is tomorrow, or like in 3 days more, so but anyway, and maybe this is like another point where this palette can be improved, in terms of like we could like manage this otherwise, so knowing when you are going to be onboarded is easier. That I think it will be like very helpful for builders. Yeah, that would be really cool. I was reading the comment there, like it would be a nice field in the UI. Sadly, the UI is like not completely dependent on us, but I think we could work it out. I make no promises. Like, we still like have a lot of things and points that we are like discussing about to improve Rococo, and even though like it's on the table, like it's there. But yeah, well, I was like I was getting lost. Let's go back to the code. So let's see a little bit, if you want, for example, how the temporary leases are assigned. Oops, sorry. Let's go to the temp assignment. And here we will see that well, if you check out a little bit the code, and you see like how the extensions are made, all of them require an origin that is assigned slot, origin that is configured to be root, right? So sudo basically for Rococo. And there we do a little bit of checks, like before giving a slot for the 20 parachains. Like we require that the path thread exists. We require like there is a manager for it, because if not, like, I don't know, there will be like, it will not make sense, to import something that doesn't like fulfill a series of requirements that are pretty basic. And what I'm looking for here in the code, it is the that I don't see it right now.
What were you looking for?
The condition for assuring that a parity is not like sitting down in the queue forever.
Mm-hmm. That would answer Daniel's question fully, if he can
Yeah.
figure out where that code is.
Here, this is what I was looking for. Right, this line here. So what it does is basically check that the last time you were onboarded is not bigger, like the difference between the current lease and the last time you were onboarded is not bigger than double that quantity, like the double the time that a parachain is onboarded for. So basically, that you have not been, if you have been onboarded, if you have not been onboarded like for more than 2 rotations, then you get like some priority. I hope that makes sense.
Mhm.
So if that distance, that difference, it's 6 or bigger in this case, like you will get like, you will be pushed, into the pending temp slots that will get into the next rotation as a product. I hope that is helpful.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what more I can show from here. There is, I mean, the palette is super cool. I didn't code it though, but I don't think there is much to be shown here because, like, I mean, it's like a wrapper around the slots palette. The slots palette is something that is working on any other relay chain. So it's like how assigning like,
Yep, maybe one thing, Ale, if you go at the
yeah,
very top of the palette, we can see that most of the things are configurable, right, in terms of which are the actual parameters that this palette is using. I think it's all the way to the top, if I'm not mistaken, like the number of.
are you looking for the here? This is what you are mentioning.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
So the number
In
of.
the runtime configuration.
Exactly. The number of permanent slots per period, temporary slots per period, max permanent slots, it's all configurable, right? And it cannot be changed with any runtime upgrade. So we are like looking for that sweet spot here, on again trying to maximize the testing without compromising the network. So feel free anytime, any 1 year, to give us feedback on, hey, this is working, this is not working, or whatever that could be.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Everything right now points to that maybe 3 days is not enough.
Yeah.
And luckily, it is something like it's very easy to fix. But yeah,
Definitely. Alejandro, I was wondering about the exact differences between the parameters in Rococo versus Kusama. So my understanding is that it's pretty much the same runtime, the same relay chain. It's got, however, more. Santiago used the word aggressive parameters, where I think really just it's like we want to test faster, we want to do things with less wait times and stuff like that. But maybe can you step us through like what parameters that stand out to you that are particularly interesting in Rococo?
so let's look at them directly. But yeah, basically everything that involves waiting time or everything that is, I don't know, cooldowns or some costs are lower. But because it makes sense, right? Like if you are preparing a test network, if you're preparing a test environment, it has to be like effective. It has to be like meaningful in his purpose. If we are going to be onboarding test parachains here, and after they run a runtime upgrade, we are making them wait like 1 day until they can like run another runtime upgrade or whatever, then it loses a little bit the capability of testing because yeah, it's not that effective. So most of those values are configured in a way that are small, I mean low in its quantity, but still not zero, some of them, and small but present enough to be to be meaningful in terms of, okay, there is like I'm looking for configuration, I don't find it. Okay, there is like a waiting time here. Maybe I just need to wait 10 minutes. That is not stopping my testing process or my development process, but it means that I need to wait when this happens. That after on Kusama or Polkadot, when this happens, like the waiting, the cooldown or whatever it is, it will be like way bigger. But I am aware on the testing phase that this exists, right? Or if I need to pay a deposit for something, maybe deposits are not the best example because it makes no sense to remove them completely, but maybe like reduce them. So okay, like you need to pay a deposit. That in Rococo, I mean, like tokens are free, but they have no value. So like it makes no sense. Like,
yeah,
what I want to say is like I will be equally happy to pay like 1,000 rocks to pay 1 rock because the value is not but
it doesn't make a difference.
yeah, still like you need the faucet and everything to get them, or we send them to you or whatever, another person.
Right. I mean, what you're saying really is that it's completely configurable as it is today. It's sort of configured how we think it's right, with mirroring Kusama, but also making it a fast net, like Rucker says, rather than a test. It's a fast test net, right? And then I think the interesting part of this conversation is like what next, like how to make this onboarding experience more efficient. Well, is it working? Maybe it's working fine, and maybe we have benchmarks to tell us that maybe only in a year from now we'll need to think about a solution. Like how soon do we need to maybe change how this onboarding process looks like? These are all kind of questions that I have on my mind, and I don't know how if we're ready to go there now, but just putting it out there.
Yeah. Well, before maybe we jump into one last comment I have for the configurability of all of this, right? And that again is, and I know I'm being repetitive with this, but this again comes to the role that the ecosystem needs to play in all of this, right? All of this can be changed. All of this can be adjusted to suit everyone's needs here, right? So feedback is more than welcome, right? It's actually encouraged, where you can discuss and tell us like, hey, this would work different for me because of A, B, C, and D if we do like this right here, right? So please hit us with that feedback. It's very valuable for us, and we can change it, right? As long as it does not compromise the network, we can go at it. So please.
Santiago, where's the best place for people to give feedback if they wanted to?
That's a great question as well. I would say right now, all that has to do with Rococo, creating an issue on the support issue is going to be the best way that we can look into it. So I definitely encourage anybody to just share their comments there. If you already have created an issue to create your parachain ID, to onboard your parachain to Rococo, we always try to keep that conversation on the same issue, right? So anything that you need from us, you can post it there. If not, feel free to create a new issue and we'll look into it and we'll pick it up. Yeah, that one. Thank you, Sasha.
I'm just sharing the link in the chat. For those of you on YouTube, you need to get on Crowdcast to see this. Super cool. I mean, this is super interesting because there's this initiative where we want this testnet to be completely free. We want it to be community driven. It has no intrinsic value. With Substrate, this is why we're here, right? Substrate. We have the ability to completely program how new slots can get acquired, how like this rotation of lease periods should be obtained. And right now it's configured with certain parameters, but in the future it could be that multiple teams run their validators, and there's a process where Alejandro doesn't need to be at the entrance of the hotel with parachains queued up in front of him that want a slot, right? And I think it's really interesting to kind of open this up to the community and see what they think. There's actually a question that's related to what I just mentioned: is how do you become a validator to the Rococo chain?
I can maybe take that up and then comment a little bit on what you were saying there, Sasha. So anybody can become a validator on the Rococo chain, right? As with any other network, you can just look into the chain spec for Rococo. It's live on the repository. and then go for it. The thing though is that you will never be earning any tokens. There's no staking. There's no way that you will be elected to participate in the network. So if you want to do it just for kicks and just to play around and see how to do it, that's perfectly enough. But you will never be participating in consensus as it is right now. So you need to bear that in mind as well.
Right. However, has there been conversations around what it would look like to kind of incentivize new validators to the Rococo?
Yes, and it always was a bit more on the side of allowing teams that have long-lasting slots to write validators as well to keep the network a bit more afloat. But still, again, with the issue of not being a value-bearing network, it's hard to come up with a good design that would not compromise tokens for people that really want to test this out, right? Because again, if somebody just plays around with the faucet and gets 50% of the issuance of rocks in the network just to make sure that they are elected as a validator in the network, that's not something that we want to encourage, right? So those are the things that we need to be aware of. So yeah, those are the discussions going on at the moment. And the same thing happens with what you were saying before, Sasha, but I forgot, on opening this up and not having Ale as a gatekeeper, right? Which again, he's not a gatekeeper, right? He's just like allowing this to work. He does not say no to anybody, right? So it's a very inclusive hotel, if you wish. But the idea here is that there were some ideas on whenever the substrate to substrate bridge is working to sort of like have a one-way bridge from Rococo to Kusama and or Polkadot. And in that way, understanding which are the live parachains there, and sort of like have some sort of attestation there going on to say, okay, this parachain that wants a slot on Rococo is actually this other one that has a slot on Kusama, and then assigning a long-lasting slot. If that check does not happen, there is a short-term slot automatically, right? But again, this is way in the future. These are very preliminary discussions that we're having, and I don't think we're ready yet for that.
Awesome, yeah. And do you envision having a place for the community to participate in this discussion? Where would that take place, if anywhere?
Eventually, yes. I think that right now it's a more of like understanding ourselves, what's possible and what's not. But eventually, for sure. I mean, again, this ideally will be something that the community owns and works with, right? And decides how it works. The only reason why we're keeping this the way that it is right now is to make sure that it gets to a point where the value is accrued for Rococo as a network, not in value as dollars, but value as it's being valued by the community, so the community then has this objective of keeping it live as well. So yeah, we are trying to get to that point, and the only way to get there is to get more and more builders to be on live here. So the moment that you have, I don't know, 2,000 smart contracts deployed on the contracts parachain, right? That depend on the contracts parachain on Rococo and the XCM channel that the contracts parachain has with the Akala testnet. I don't know, right? So whenever all those connections start to happen, then the network itself is super valuable for the ecosystem. We are getting there. We're going there very fast. We're still not at that point.
So essentially, like to put what you're saying differently, or to put it more explicitly, we can envision a world where Rococo is a valueless network, but it's still interoperable with other value-bearing networks.
Yes, but not to exchange value, right? Just to read information, if you wish.
Just to read and write just to read.
I wouldn't write, right? So, but Rococo could. I mean, in this idea of having automatic slot assignments, Rococo could, in a trustless way, read what's the state of Kusama somehow. And from there, we have assumptions. But then what I was saying before is Akala, for example, has its testnet as well on Rococo. So let's imagine for a second, and Kilt as well, right? So let's imagine for a second a team that builds an Ink smart contract that, in order to make an AUSD transaction, Rococo AUSD transaction, right, needs to attest somebody on RILT, which is Kilt's parachain on Rococo, right? So all of that fabric, all that testnet is already there for people to try it on. It's just a matter of like getting those developers to try these tools.
And has there been any conversations around using Kilt's protocol to create an identity layer for participants of Rococo, i.e., validators, or just slot people that chains that have their slot, in order to create a sort of incentive scheme, right, where it's your reputation is at stake.
We have not, and it could be a very interesting experiment, right? Again, how can we deploy that in Rococo, right? Using Kilt's parachain Rococo altogether, right? And having that running natively in Rococo and yet working all together. But yeah, this is what we were talking before, right? What Ale is showing. Those are all the HRMP channels that are live right now, which is all this parachain.
Right.
So any developer could use XCM to just transact and do stuff amongst all of these parachains right here.
Super cool. Actually, so there's a couple questions here, and I had one related to HRMP channels, which is Alejandro, when there's HRMP channels opened, do they just close after the 3-day period expires?
No. The HRMP channel stays in there, and every time you are onboarded, you are good to use it. You don't have to reopen it every time you go up. Yeah.
Cool. And so we have another question from Marco that's asking, so the developer journey ultimately for a Substrate developer is you go from the tutorials to Rococo to Kusama to Polkadot. I think that's a very accurate guide. It's a very clean way of looking at what a parachain's developer journey looks like. I think for sure, yeah.
Yeah, 100%. That would be a very good journey, in my opinion. And I wouldn't even call it. For me, it's an ongoing journey, if you wish, right? Because then in the end, you can have that setup where you have a live parachain on Polkadot, a live parachain on Kusama, and a live parachain on Rococo, and then you test it on Rococo without value, right? You say, okay, the development assumptions that I had here are working. Then you just go ahead and test it on Kusama, and you say, okay, my development assumptions plus my economic assumptions are working well. Then you just go ahead and deploy it on Polkadot, right? So that could be an ongoing sort of development journey where you have
and Rococo or any testnet, and even before Rococo, you probably have your own local testnet, right? But Rococo really is the opportunity to interact with other chains that have their own business models and business logic, and you ideally probably want to always have a slot on Rococo, right? Or always be eligible for one, because at some point when you do a runtime upgrade that wants to go into production, you will want to use it in a real, more real environment.
Yeah, exactly. That'd be amazing. Yeah, for sure.
So we kind of reached at the hour here. I don't know if you guys have much more you want to discuss. There is a final question. The question is: are there limitations in the terms of block production / finalization setup? For example, Babe and Grandpa.
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand 100% the question. Maybe Ali, you do better than me.
I can take that one. Yeah. There is nothing. There is no limitations that are special to Rock. It produces it finalizes block every 6 seconds, the relay chain, and parachains can produce blocks as they need, as they want. They can use Aura, they can use Babe, whatever, right? I will go with Aura for the parachain. But there is nothing special that only affects Rococo. There is. It's just what you could expect from Kusama in that sense. There is nothing else.
Ale, why do you say you would go with Aura versus Babe?
Yeah, if you're producing blocks with Babe, you are under the constraint of that if you don't produce a block or in one epoch or session, your chain basically breaks and it's unrecoverable. Aura doesn't have that constraint. And for it just I actually don't know if you can use Babe on a parachain. So
for a testnet, a valueless testnet, Aura is very suitable, and it's also less prone to just stalling, because Babe has this fallback mechanism. But I guess you need to have more things set up. But yeah, hopefully that answers the question on using consensus mechanisms
Yeah,
here.
there is nothing else to worry about on top just because it's Rococo, you know.
Sweet. So super cool. I mean, we are kind of wrapping up here. If there's any questions, please ask them. I wanted to kind of end with this poll that I put, which is, can you guess what teams test out the most on Rococo? Maybe Ale, you can just share, like, what are things that you're seeing people test out the most?
So runtime upgrades, 100%. Like every runtime upgrade is going through Rococo. HRMP channels and XM integrations and all that stuff. Like it's happening on Rococo. That is hot on Rococo right now. Rather than that, well, we have like more specific two use cases. For example, these raids that the team of Snowfork was doing. And it's something really cool to see, and also like happening on Rococo. But yeah, if I mean like the top two will be like runtime upgrades, HRP XCM related.
Sweet, yeah. The answer of the because I did a little survey to kind of understand how people are currently using Rococo, and the hottest topic is integration with other parachains. So you guys who voted that are right. Kudos to you. Super cool.
Yeah, and I would love to see a lot of that going on, especially on the contracts layer, right? Going forward on Rococo. So contracts, like logic of products running on a contract chain, whatever that could be, I don't mind, and utilizing all of the different services or tools that these other projects can provide. So sort of like a real building on Polkadot, if you wish, sort of experience.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So Ale, what are the two screens you have there for us?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't get to mention it before. Like what we're seeing, like it's on the left, we have Rococo config, and on the right, like it's Kusama config. And there's a list of parameters where we can find things like, I don't know, like I mentioned before, like the delay, for example, and the cooldown for the upgrades. Here we just have 100 blocks. Here, this is Kusama. There is like the delay is 600. The cooldown is 3,600. Numbers are like different. Like numbers are big. Here, for other things, for example, like the deposits for HRMP channels are 0. I will say that it will be worth it, like changing that parameter to something, even if it's small. But as it is like, it's been so dynamic to testing around HRMP lately. I think it is just convenient for it to be 0. It wouldn't make much of a difference because when using HRMP channels, you know, like teams already like have a number of accounts founded on Rococo, and the sovereign account for the para it's founded and everything. So it will not change nothing in terms of, hey, we didn't get to do this testing because we didn't pay the deposit or whatever, you know. But yeah, still, I don't know. For example, we can see like the maximum number of channels right now here is 30. Also, it is on Kusama. Most of these values try to mimic Kusama values, so the testing that is happening on Rococo makes sense, and whatever the outcome is for that testing is, you know, can be expected something similar going on Kusama. But as mentioned before, like some of these are just different because they are more convenient if they're smaller.
Cool. Yeah, it's useful to just really see this comparison between the two runtimes, where basically they're very similar, and Rococo takes out all the irrelevant economics to suit the needs of the network. So as we're wrapping up, I guess maybe we can just like lean into like the future stuff. What are you guys thinking and stuff like that? I think it's relating to Santiago's last slide, Rococo's future. So more parachains, more dApps, more crazy testing.
Exactly.
I think that kind of sums it up, right? But really, like for both of you who are very involved and have your hands very close to Rococo, what are future updates that you'd like to see for Rococo?
Personally, I'm excited about a couple of things, right? Of course, the first one and the most important one is more and more teams like testing not only parachains, but like different ways of building on top of this network, right? Specifically, and I said it before, I would very much like to see a truly Polkadot native, let's call it that way, product, which basically has its I want to go runtime, but its process is running on one chain in a decentralized way, and it's using the rest of the ecosystem for different purposes, right? So really utilizing all of this fabric that the ecosystem has to offer. But then on top of that, I'm really looking forward to a moment where the community can get more ownership of Rococo as a network, and that we see very cool experiments with this. Finally, one of the things that gets me the most excited about this, what was happened yesterday with Snowfork going live with their Snowbridge chain on Rococo, and having this very first trustless bridge between a substrate relay chain, in this case Rococo, with an Ethereum testnet, right? In this case, RingB, I think it is. So that and the value that might have for the entire ecosystem is huge. I really want to see how different teams are using this. So yeah, exciting stuff, and just on board to it, everybody.
Super cool. So Ale, what's the easiest way for people to learn how to onboard?
Yeah, right. Go to the substrate.io page, tutorials, and there's a Cumulus tutorial that shows you how to spin up a parachain and connect it to a relay chain. All the knowledge that you get from there is 100% applicable for connecting to Rococo. So yeah, that would be my recommendation. And how to manage your node, like, I don't know, I add some like basic level, like managing your node keys and such will be very handy when running your parachain and when running it, connecting it to Rococo and such. But yeah, that will be everything. There is no rush, but those two are important.
Yeah,
definitely, yeah. Well, thank you so much, guys. This was really informative. Again, like I said in the beginning, I hope that this resource will serve as educational for those looking to onboard on Rococo, but also those who are interested in being part of this conversation, right? So I left a bunch of links in the chat. I'm going to update our seminar page about the seminar session with those links so that people can go back and then review it and stuff like that. But yeah, don't forget that you guys can get involved with just discussing how you want Rococo to improve for your needs, perhaps, right? Use the subport repo. I'll also link that into our seminar plan of the day. And that being said, do you guys have any final things you want to say to the people watching?
I will be happy to check your issues if you are on board into Rococo.
Yeah, just come on over, use this. And thank you very much for joining and listening to us. I appreciate everybody's time.
Super. Thank you so much, guys. And you have a great day.
You too.
Thanks for everyone watching and listening. We'll see you in 2 weeks.